I want to talk to you today about how style is like war. Now, I know that can sound like a really weird comparison, but I promise that if you stick with me through these few minutes, it's all going to make sense in the end, and it's going to help you not only better understand the importance of how you should be dressing, but also actually get better at dressing well so that you can improve your life. Now, if you think about it, war is something that if you're not really engaged in it, if it's not something that you're trained in or something that you have experience in, it's really easy to oversimplify. It's just a bunch of guys trying to kill each other. And to some extent, that's kind of how a lot of us look at the way that we should dress. It doesn't matter, it's just clothing. It's just cloth that's put on your body. But to those who have actually spent time and studied and are engaged in these different things, there's a whole lot more than just the overly simplistic explanation of what's actually going on. So let's take, for example, the idea of whether or not you should actually be caring about your style. Now, if you think about it in the context of defense, as in like a defensive war, if a country or another person attacks you, as much as you wish that weren't the case, just ignoring it or just burying your head in the sand doesn't do you any good. In fact, it does you a lot of harm. Your inability or unwillingness to accurately and adequately respond to the aggression of the other party does you a lot of damage. Now, the same thing happens with your style. Whether or not people should be judging you based on how you look is irrelevant, because as soon as somebody does, then you are now in the defensive position and you can bury your head in the sand, you can pretend that it doesn't matter, just like you can pretend that the guy who's holding a gun to your head doesn't matter. But the reality is, it matters, and it can impact and affect your life. And so you need to be able to understand that, yes, it may be defensive, it may even be to some extent, if you're unfamiliar with it, a little bit unpleasant, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't matter. And the more you can develop this skill set, the more you can develop the mindset to accurately respond to these quote-unquote threats, the better off you're going to be. What's interesting is I can guarantee you that you will experience way more often having somebody judge you by the way that you look than you will experience somebody actually threatening your life. The vast majority of us are going to experience judgment from other people way more often than we experience physical threats. And so it is very much in our best interest to learn how to navigate those waters and develop the skill set so that when that happens, we can react and respond accordingly. Now, another way that style is like war is it's not as simple as we think it is. Take, for example, the three primary components of war. You have missions, strategies, and tactics. Now, when you think about the way that those work together, any oversimplification of that doesn't matter. If your goal, if your mission in a war is to go in and defeat Nazi Germany, then fighting Portugal doesn't really accomplish the goal, does it? So your strategy of fighting Portugal becomes totally irrelevant. Just like if the necessary strategy is one that involves cavalry or air force, then by attacking with submarines in a landlocked country, it doesn't do you any good. The strategy and even the tactics become totally irrelevant. And we experience the same thing with our clothing, with our style. So often we think that all we need to do is pay attention to tactics. That as long as I'm wearing something that looks good, which is totally undefinable, that's like saying as long as I get the bad guy, it's like, well, who's the bad guy and what does get him mean or anything? Totally undefinable. But as long as I'm wearing something that looks good, that the colors work or that the patterns work, then that's it. And again, that's a totally over-dependent focus on tactics without factoring in things like strategies or objectives or missions. And that's just taking those three simple facts. You can add to that the idea that you have to win a war physically, you have to be able to win it mentally, and you have to be able to win it emotionally. Take, for example, the power of something like a nuclear bomb. If the United States wanted to win the war against Vietnam, a few decades ago, they absolutely could have physically gone in and won that war by dropping a few nukes. Absolutely 100%. But even though we could have won that war physically, by going in and dropping nukes, we would have absolutely lost that war on both a mental and a morale perspective, along with the moral perspective, not only from the way that we saw ourselves, but from the way that the rest of the world would interact with us as well. Same thing applies to your style. You can't just wear something based on the idea of, I like it. Now, yes, you liking it has to be there, just like with war, you do have to be able to win on a physical level, but that physicality, just like that I like it component, is not the end all be all of your ability to win the war of style. You have to think about whether or not it contributes to your goals. You have to think about whether or not it actually helps you accomplish other things in your life. And so just this idea of I like it, or I think I'm confident when I wear it, is way too limited. So ultimately, just like you have in war, you can have in style systems and components and things that work together. You have to be able to look at your style the way it a general looks at a war. You have to be able to see and try to predict everything that your enemy is doing. You have to be able to see the ramifications of the decisions you're making 1 or 2 steps down the road. And again, whether you like that or not is irrelevant, because there are consequences for either doing it well or doing it poorly. And you are going to be in situations where your style will either positively or negatively affect you. So it is in your best interest to learn how to do that. Now, the best way to do that is to not get caught up on just tactics. It's not to spend all your time thinking about, well, how do I mix these patterns? Or what colors should I be wearing? Or which suit is the best suit? Again, tactics, totally appropriate, totally necessary, but don't just live in that realm. If you want to be able to truly master your appearance, truly be able to leverage it in ways that's going to benefit your life, then you have to think above and beyond that. So in the next video, I'm going to start giving you some of these steps. I'm going to start giving you some of this system that I've developed, some of these strategies that I've employed with my coaching clients to help you better understand how to master your style, to become a general as opposed to just a simple soldier when it comes to the world of your aesthetics and your appearance. And I'm also going to be able to have something for you that's going to tie it all in together and totally put you in the driver's seat when it comes to developing a sense of style that works for you wherever, whenever, with whomever.